Hey everyone, welcome to the Lowercase B Podcast. My name is Alex Burkhart, and today I'm talking with Edward Frazer, the founder and CEO of DryMerge, an AI agent platform. You're probably wondering what an AI agent platform is. We're going to spend most of the time today talking about it. Edward, thanks for joining me today.
All right, appreciate you having me. I'm super excited.
Let's go. Break down for everyone who's listening, what is an AI agent in the most fundamental, non-computer science terms? What is it made of, and how is it different than what we see ChatGPT is today?
Okay, an AI agent is something that has tools, right? So if I'm, an engineer, one tool, you said not engineering terms.
No, it's okay. This is good.
Say I'm an engineer, or
people know who engineers are. They don't understand JavaScript, but they know.
Right. If I'm an engineer, I have my editor, right? Write code, right? I have Google, right? And I have my wealth of knowledge, right, from college or whatever else, right? And that's pretty much all I have. When you give me a task, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the task, think about it, pair it with, kind of the tools I have, right, whether it's the knowledge in my brain, right, and then I'm going to start writing code. And then when I don't know something, I'm going to go to Google. An AI agent is very similar, right? You give it tools, you give it a task, right, and it goes in a loop, using its tools until it thinks it's done with the task, right? So every time it uses a tool, it will then it will get a response from the tool, right? It's successfully sent an email. Well, it will think about your task. It's if your task is send one outbound email to this lead, it's going to think, okay, I just sent an email. Do I need to use any more tools, right? And then hopefully it's going to say, no, I don't. I'm done, right? And so it is kind of, you can imagine it as a brain, right? It has tools, and it will go in a loop using its tools until it's done accomplishing your task.
So one of the things I thought it was really funny. We met each other awkwardly through online comments. You said something really, I think, thoughtful about building agents in the current environment, and we seem to kind of hit it off. I'd love to kind of get from you, what is it about the maturity of the technology today that got you convicted that I'm going to build an AI agent company? Moreover, we shared before we got on the camera that you talked about OpenAI's release of O1 and how it really changed the game. But you've been building DryMerge, if I'm not mistaken, for almost 18 months now. You started it when you were a year into college, and then you graduated and continued building. How did you have conviction on this idea 18 months before some foundational technology made it really, really possible?
Yeah. So we initially didn't have conviction on this idea. We came in very, very opposite end of the spectrum on agent, processing context and autonomously making decisions. We initially wanted to create a dev tool for API integrations. And the idea was that we could basically listen to what a dev wanted to do in plain English, right? I want to integrate my service with Gmail, right? And here's how my service works. Here's how I want to integrate it with Gmail. And we would write a configuration, which was basically just code, to do it. And the idea there was, it's too expensive to run models at runtime for every time you receive a new Gmail, right? Matching it with the user's API, et cetera, et cetera. And two, reliability, right? You want to do it in the exact same way every time. And we just didn't think that models could do it. So we spent a lot of time kind of playing around in dev tools. And we realized that devs want to write code. We were creating a configuration language that wasn't Python, wasn't Java, wasn't anything anybody wanted to use, and so it wasn't a very useful thing. And so we switched over to a different audience, which was non-technical users, because saying, hey, you can do something that you weren't able to do before is completely different than talking to a developer who can do it if they put enough time and effort in. And we wanted to create workflows that integrated different apps. So when I get a new Gmail, put it into my Google Sheet, kind of the simple Zapier style stuff. And the idea was we can do it in a chat interface, and people will kind of have, it will be easier for people. And we took that same kind of, rote workflow thing, and we adapted it to the chat, hidden behind the chat interface. So whenever a user chatted, we'd set up kind of that same data mapping, et cetera, et cetera. And after a few months of playing around with this, we realized that the space of user requests was bigger than our ability to functionally make workflows, right? So you would receive requests for things like, hey, if the email looks like this, then put it into Sheets. If it doesn't look like this, then put it into Excel. And then after you've done both of those things, send me a Slack message, right? Then in your data model, you have to start encoding things like conditionality, and it becomes harder and harder for the LLM to set it up all up front. So we're like, actually, it's way simpler if we just switch to the LLM, right? At every step, makes one decision, right? Which is update Google Sheet, looks at what it's done, looks at the instructions from the user, and then does the other thing. So the kind of plain English truly came into capacity like, almost a year after we started. And after that, the product actually got worse because
It got worse.
It got worse.
Well, walk me through what did it look like
Yeah.
when it got worse? Like how did you kind of
It
come to that
started
conclusion?
doing things badly. When the user says, hey, update the sheet this way, it wouldn't update the sheet in that way. Or it would choose not to update the sheet at all. Or it would send the Slack message first. Or it would forget a step. Or it would do things twice. Right? When you're dealing with actual business data, that's really bad. You don't want to be sending 2 notifications. If you're doing automating outbound with DryMerge, you definitely don't want to be sending 2 or 3 outbound emails with slightly different text or placeholder text within it, right? And so it got worse because the LLMs are random stochastic things.
Mm-hmm.
And if you run it 100 times, the probability of failure is just really, really high. And so we just see a lot of failures within those 100 times we ran it because it's randomly sampling actions.
Yeah. I mean, Ilya Sutskever says pretty clearly, the model wants to do what it thinks you want.
Yeah.
But that's not always enough, right? If the model can only think so far, if the model is only going to be right 80% of the time and you build that into your core workflow, or in your example, it seemed more like 90, 95% of the time, that's a lot of failures that users aren't used to seeing. And that's kind of how we got started talking about this originally was, hey, classical software engineering doesn't allow for that sort of fault tolerance.
Yeah.
We talk about, and even especially in enterprise, especially in the content delivery space, we're talking 5 nines, 6 nines, availability and reliability are paramount, and businesses only really care about that. Why is it then that businesses trust people to do these tasks that have a given failure rate even when a person does it, but they don't trust machines? Why do you think people right now don't see a fair trade-off between a human which makes mistakes and a computer that makes mistakes?
You can talk to and replace people better. You can talk to a person and say, hey, you're not doing your job correctly. Here's how you should do it. And the next time there's a higher probability they do it correctly. If the person never does it correctly, then you can fire them and hire somebody else. There's a lot of people. If you're buying SaaS for a specific thing, there might be 3 or 4 vendors. So if the software doesn't work, first of all, you can't talk to it and tell it it's doing it wrong, which means you have to go talk to the company. Mm-hmm. And the company has 5,000 other customers. So there's no guarantee that they're actually going to make it work for you. And if you churn off them, there's only 3 other companies you can go to who are competing in a similar market and probably have the exact same thing. So the bar is just a lot higher, or you just won't use the software.
Yeah. Well, it kind of gets me on this topic of, do people buy software or do they buy outcomes? What are people really buying when they work with you as a vendor?
People buy outcomes. It is, you introed us as an AI agent platform. That's kind of hard to conceptualize, right? It's hard to understand. Typically, when people sign up for DryMerge, they're looking to sync invoices to spreadsheets and Drive, or they're looking to take all their communication in Outlook and then update their CRM with it, right? Those are very clear problem statements. It just so happens that our broad platform can serve all of those use cases. And so the business case for something like that is, okay, you can take a bunch of people who have a lot of specific problems and you can actually solve those problems well. So people 100% buy, outcomes.
Yeah. And it's often the case that they come for an outcome, but they state the outcome they're looking for in the form of the problem or the pain that's in front of them. How do you, when you're listening to your user base and you and your team are kind of working through the next feature or the next thing you're adding, what do you seek to hear from your user base to understand if you're getting the problem right for them?
So I'll go very granular into how we do it. When a user signs up, they set up an automation, and the automation has a set of instructions. part one of the platform is allowing them to create the right set of instructions for what they actually want, right? Because language is an imperfect interface, there's going to be information lost, but we try to get them to create the right thing. Once they have that thing, it's literally a set of instructions. It's a document, right? Once they have that document made, our job is to follow the document religiously. So whenever I get a new email, put it into a sheet and put all attachments into Drive in this folder format. We need to do that 100% of the time or they don't trust us, right? And so when we talk to our users, we try to figure out if we failed at one, the other, or both of those things, right? And a success is, yeah, I used the platform. It was really easy to set up the set of instructions. It's exactly what I wanted. And it's been running for 2 days. I've processed 120 invoices and all of them were correct. A failure is, hey, I was trying to do this, but I said to use my email. It gave me a sign in with Gmail instead of sign in with Outlook. So I lost trust and, I didn't move forward. Can you guys actually do Outlook? Right? That's a failure because we chose the wrong thing. We didn't ask correctly, right? Another failure is, hey, I set this up, right? I ran the test, it worked, but now it's not actually listening to my Discord messages and posting them on Twitter. So maybe our integration broke. Or, hey, you set this up and, it's listening to my Discord messages and posting on Twitter, but, sometimes it filters the Discord message and it doesn't actually post. And it says that it's missing some information, but it doesn't, right? And so there's a high bar. They need to get exactly what they want. Yeah. And then they need to see that happen 100 times.
It's interesting. We set such a high bar for machines. I think back to, not back, I think very, very recently to the self-driving conversation where people talk about what will it take for you to trust a car to drive you? And I talk with my father a lot because he's actually got an AI for Tesla and he lives in Pennsylvania, which is pretty far from here in California. And I found that there was a period of time where he was unwilling to try full self-driving because he had had a couple of bad experiences. And I tried to find a way to understand, like, what's the gap? Like, I'm curious in how he's experiencing it, but I get very binary kind of crappy answers back from him. Right? It's working, it's not working. And a lot of people, when they're building something and they're really in love with what they're building, can mistake the thing doesn't work to no one cares that I don't care that it works, or I don't have a way to kind of express my frustration that I'm not getting what I want out of it. And I asked my dad, I'm like, well, maybe it's easier to think about how good self-driving is by giving it a number. How experienced is the driver? You taught me how to drive. You've taught my brother and sister, and you taught other people how to drive.
Right.
How old is the driver? And that was like an unlock for him. And I said, and he would give me an age, like how old he thought. I was like, he said, well, right now it's like 16 with a learner's permit. What does that tell you? It tells you a couple of things. But I'm curious, like, what do you think about when you hear that?
Well, I think two things. First, is the most obvious one. You reframed and you were instantly able to get a lot more information, right? 16 with a driver's permit is like incredibly, that's a ton of information. Like I can project that perfectly. It's not working I don't know what's going on. The second thing is people immediately jump to thresholds. Right? It's like immediately jump to binary outcome, right? And that is true, I think, of most software. It works, it doesn't work. And it's challenging to actually work them through to the productive, hey, here's a spectrum of how it's working, give me more information. It's really hard to get there.
Yeah, well, modern software to 90% of people is binary deterministic. And we've even trained ourselves culturally. When software doesn't work, it's what? A bug. And what is a bug? A bug implies it must be fixed. And I want to take this back to a conversation we were having before we started around what happens when a user experiences something in a tool that they don't expect, especially when it's an AI tool. We mentioned that people can get angry at you whenever the tool doesn't work.
They get incredibly angry.
Tell me more about that. Like what is that? How do you experience it?
So we experience it primarily in two ways. First, when you're talking to a chatbot, you can just say whatever's on your mind. If the chatbot does something wrong, you will call the chatbot names. You will say terrible things to the chatbot because the thing you want isn't working and you're investing time into it. You're losing time, right? So you will be pissed at the chatbot. And you can it's interesting though, because when you're pissed at the chatbot, you still want it to do the thing, right? So you'll call it a name and then be like, please do this, right?
Yeah. The other, it's like a disappointed big brother.
Exactly.
It's like, come on, man, you're not doing it. Like, I just told you what I want.
That's exactly the emotion. Yeah. And the second thing is, okay, when we reach out to them and there's an email, right, then it's a little bit more, you're talking to a human now, right? You have to, it's like, hey, I tried this. This part was pretty bad. I didn't, do what I wanted, but it's a really cool idea. Glad to see, people working on X, Y, Z. So you'll get exactly what they were trying to do. I was trying to do this. I wasn't able to do it, right? And sometimes you'll get a little bit more information. And the third thing is when they actually hop on a call with you, right? And typically people will not be extremely angry on call. Sometimes it happens, but it's a little bit more rare. I think like the closer you get to a human, the more your like, human, social interaction skills come into play. But they'll give you a lot of information because you can ask questions, right? You can be like, so you're trying to do this, you're trying to sync all of your calendar emails to here. Did you want to do that once or did you want that for every new calendar email? And it's like, no, actually I wanted to do it every time, but only for, these invites that looked like this, right? And so there's just, the anger is, the like vulgarity of it is proportional to how far away, or I guess inversely proportional to how far away you are from the person. And the information you get from it kind of depends on the interface, right? Whether you can keep chatting and whether you're trying to do something, or whether it's just, simple email, you don't expect to respond more, or whether you're in a conversation with someone.
Yeah, I think this is a new paradigm of feedback that a lot of us aren't used to seeing and experiencing, candidly. My background's in enterprise software. Yeah. I'm very used to understanding when a user's frustrated because you tend to expose your software to them while they're deciding whether or not they want to buy. You call it a trial, a POC, a pilot. You get this sort of like back and forth engagement. Yeah. And when you're working with companies, especially when your software is in the much earlier stages, you tend to try to get ahead of that user frustration. Why? Because that gets people clouded by things that get in the way of the outcome. When you're selling software to a business or even to a person, when you have a chance to interact with them, if you're doing the right thing by them, you're really trying to figure out how can I solve a problem for you?
Yeah.
Like I desire to leave you delighted with this experience. Yeah. And in the highest end of the consumer space, in the luxury space, one of the things that luxury brands, luxury experiences are fantastic at doing are understanding what you want without you having to work hard to express it. People will read your body language. They'll offer you things proactively. They have this notion of service, this notion of if I expose myself and I'm vulnerable to you and try to meet all of your needs without you asking, I'll learn very quickly what you want, and then I can provide you a top-tier service. In software, especially in enterprise software, when you have a complex buying process, there's a lot of time invested in making sure you're on the right problem. And then once you're on the right problem, there's a lot invested in, can I get you this outcome on this very difficult problem again and again and again? Now, when we move to these more, and this is again in the deterministic legacy software space, we move into AI, especially probabilistic software, you now can do all of those things, but still run into the loop where no matter what, it's only right 94 times out of 100. And in your opinion, does that mean that we have to change buyers' expectations, or does that mean that the software is still distant from where it needs to be?
I'm going to say a lame answer, which is it kind of depends on the use case. There are some use cases which are unambiguous, right? I'll just keep using examples from DryMerge because it's what I know best, right? If I say, hey, I have an email with a PDF, I need it to be in Drive in this folder. There is zero, right? Yeah. There's no ambiguity. That needs to happen 100% of the time. When I say something like, when I get an email from a potential customer, find out who they are and add them to my CRM, what is a potential customer, right? That is something where there has to be iteration. A potential customer for me is not a potential customer for you, right? And in fact, the way I think about a potential customer probably depends on like my lead qualification process and various other things, which kind of you need to inject context in. And so there just needs to be a higher degree of communication between yourself and the product to actually get it working. And so when you initially set it up, it will probably work 80% of the time. Potential customer, probably less, right? If you just say potential customer, maybe 50% of the time. It will capture people who are selling to you, right? It will capture people who are like disqualifying themselves very clearly from the lead process. And as you give it feedback and add more information, then you can start getting up there to 94, 95%. But the thing with a potential customer is at some point a human doesn't know, right? At some point, I wouldn't know if it's a lead, right? Sometimes I come away from a demo call and I'm like, that was okay, right? I definitely could have done things better. They're interested in the software for this use case, but I don't really know if I would consider them a customer because there's an integration we have to build that's not on the roadmap. There's X, Y, and Z, right? And you can't expect the LLM to know better than you, right? And so that's where you're going to cap out. On the very, very human tasks where you're replacing human labor directly, something which you would have an SDR for or an account executive for, that's where you're going to see a lower you're going to see lower reliability, but it has to be lower.
But how do you all think about building with the trust of the user in mind?
Yeah, okay. I'll give you an example and then I'll generalize. We were building a feature about 4 months ago that allowed you to run an agent on all your existing data. So for example, when I get a new Gmail, put the invoice in Sheets and then put it in Google Drive. That only applies for every future email. What if you want to migrate every past email, right? We have a test loop where you create an automation, then you test it. And originally, we actually did ask for approval on every read, right? So every step in the test loop, it's like, okay, I want you to search through my emails and search the internet, right, for all information on leads of this variety, right? And then I want you to send my team a summary on Slack. When you go through the test loop, you would originally need to say, okay, every time it wanted to search the internet, it could do it 15 times. That loses trust for users because they're like, okay, this is kind of useless. Is it always going to ask me for approval on searching the internet? If so, that's like a useless tool, right? So actually sometimes, giving more control to the user is actually bad.
Well, yeah, because no one wants to babysit a tool.
Exactly.
Like you now, like I want to go be able to get a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Between this, and if I have to press the space
it's
button
supposed to
every
save me time, right? And so there's an interesting balance. And so what it goes down to is the way we think about it is what does the user want, right? What are the ways it can go wrong, right? And how do we engineer so that, when the user runs into an issue or isn't completely sure that the software is basically holding their hand. Like, hey, I got you. It's going to be okay, right? And so that's how we think about it, which is a little bit more vague, but it's a complicated thing. It really does depend on the product you're making. And also it starts at the landing page, right? Like we have a bunch of use case landing pages for, hey, we can sync X to Y, right? The user has to believe that, right? The user has to believe that we can actually, sync your Gmail to your spreadsheet, right? And so you have to present a compelling image and say how you're going to do it and say that, yeah, it's magical AI, but here's how it actually works, right? And then you have to provide social validation to show that other people use your solution, right? And then they need to go through, right? So the landing page problem is completely different than, the actually using the product problem, but it's all about user trust, right? And it's also in a funnel, right? They go through the landing page and then they use the product, right? They go through the test loop first, right? And then they might, after they go through the test loop, they maybe turn it on. And then after they turn it on, they're like, wait, I want all my emails in. And then they go through the manual run thing. And all of those, stages of the funnel, right, have different mechanisms for assuring their trust. So you just need to validate every single one of them, right? And break it into, thinking about it in terms of a funnel is really good because you can kind of section it off and really think about, okay, I just need to worry about a user in the test loop, right? And making sure that they trust that the software is going to work in the test loop. And then I only need to care about manual run, right? If you can do that, I think it's a pretty good strategy.
Yeah, we talked earlier about understanding the user journey, and the funnel is a great example. You're right. And not everyone goes the whole way down. And attrition outside of the funnel is important, because if someone leaves the funnel, could be because that user didn't want the outcome, or it could be because they attrited because they couldn't find a button. When they clicked the button, they got an error. Who knows? When we talk about toil, though, because one of the things we mentioned is you're an AI platform that's here to automate tasks and help reduce toil for the end users. I think toil is one of the core reasons why people start to get upset.
Yes.
Whenever a tool doesn't do what they want, even if it's not an AI-powered tool.
Right.
And I think that's because I, as a user, see everything I use as an extension of me.
Yeah.
If it's a tool, just like you mentioned for agents, you have tools. Agents and people are essentially the same thing.
Yeah.
We have tools available.
Right.
When I'm toiling as a user, it's because I'm doing something and I feel like my time is being wasted.
Yes.
Or I feel like I'm an easier solution is within reach, but I am stuck or I can't get to it.
Right.
When you think about a user journey, what does toil look like in that journey? How do you know you have someone locked in this position where they have to toil their way to get that last mile?
It's very easy for us to see. It's just they're in a chat. The chat's really long, and they're begging the model. They're like, please do it this way.
Yes.
And then they're like, is it done yet? Right? Questions like, what are you doing? Why? Right? Toil is also, the chat makes it very easy to see, right? I think it's one of the actually kind of beautiful parts of the interface, right? Like user emotions are, it is a medium that preserves so much more of what the user's actually feeling than something like clicks, right? But then there's tools like, analytics tools like PostHog, right? And then you go on and you watch a user, and they're like, okay, click this. They're trying to find something, right? A lot of the time it's like they don't know if we integrate with something, or they don't know how to authenticate. We've told them to authenticate. They have no idea where. So they're looking and they'll rage click, right? And then it's like, that's toil, right? Because you can see the moment where they're like, I'm wasting my time. I just want this to be done, right? So it's really just any sign of frustration is toil, right? And I think the other kind of interesting thing is people will blame themselves, right? When we send an email, we're like, hey, we think this was broken. We just fixed it. Would you like us to try it again for you and try to get this up and working? They're like, oh, no, I just messed up, right? I couldn't get it to work, right? That's my bad. It's like, no, it's not. Like there was no way you could get that to work, right? Like it was just broken on our end, right? But people will really internalize that. And if you start feeling bad about yourself when using a product, that's a very strong negative association, right?
Yeah.
Like regardless of whether you actually blame yourself, you blame yourself when you were using a product, and you never want to go back to the thing that made you feel bad, right? I was going to say that what most AI startups do is build the interface to register your intent so that the model can do it. But that's not actually true.
But it is what a lot of them do.
It is what a lot of them do.
In fact, we were talking earlier, I think most tools in the AI space are an interface to the underlying model and the outcomes.
Right.
So I'm with you there.
Yeah, I think that is definitely true. I also think that there are hard engineering problems that basically come down to model and compute capacity, right? Like retrieving the right information, for example, right? That is a problem that basically every AI startup does, right? And that's the core value add they put on top of the model. They retrieve the information that you need to solve your problem. So I think as context windows increase, right, the amount of information a model can ingest without having to manage it, that kind of value add from AI startups will slowly dissipate, right? So then as you said, it is the interface, right? The moat you have is how well can you allow a user to register their intent, right, for this omniscient model that's going to get their task done, right? And I think the future there, I'll just apply, things we've learned going along the way. Users, some things are better to express visually than in chat, right? We originally started all chat with, I guess, MVP. I don't even want to call it an MVP because it wasn't very viable, but it was all chat, right? And the user would have to chat for everything. Sometimes you just want to see an on switch, right? It's a lot more efficient to just press it and turn it on than to turn it off, right? Then to test it, we originally had people say, I want to test this. If you see a test button, you might not even know you want to test it, right? But you kind of feel uncertain. You see a test button, you're way more certain, right? And so there's a lot of human intent, which is very visual. And so I think a lot of what is going to transpire is interfaces are going to they're going to communicate what is happening with the model very efficiently that allows you to be like, oh, I want to tweak this, right? What's happening in your app very efficiently. And then the other thing is they're going to give you options, right? Use case discovery for us is a huge issue, right? Where sometimes, I'm pretty sure everybody on Earth has something that, well, not everybody on Earth, but say actually, let's further qualify.
I signed up for DryMerge when I first reached out to you, and the first thing that I got hit with when I signed in is a configurator. I'm like, oh, this is great, except that I don't know where I want to start.
Exactly, right.
It's the cold start problem.
It's the cold start problem, right? And it's funnel use cases to people, right? Show people what they can actually benefit from, right? I think like most people working in tech, right, could probably find problems that are worth $25 a month to pay for DryMerge. A lot of them probably way more than $25 a month, but they don't know them because they haven't. It is like literally work. It is literally work to think about your life and then to think about the tool and then be like, okay, what from here can be put onto the tool and how much time would that actually save me, right? And so interfaces are going to do a lot of, hey, here's what you want to see, right? Just like how Netflix gives you movies and you spend, hours looking through the catalog before you actually watch the movie.
Yeah.
You can do that for things like labor, right?
And right now, today, what do people complain about? Oh, I get crappy AI generated emails.
Yeah.
I get crappy AI generated bots that reach out to me.
Eventually, it's not going to be so crappy.
Eventually,
and also, it's going to be so normalized. This is going to be the way you buy things.
So Edward, what does this look like though? Because I think people struggle. I read a lot of science fiction to kind of help break my brain out of like the constraints we have today. And I found that science fiction helps me a lot to forget the constraints and think about the future. So can you paint a picture for me? What does crappy or what does not crappy look like? Like how will we begin to accept that a model that represents an agent potentially that represents me is going to interface with an agent that represents you, and they're going to come to consensus on our behalf? Could you kind of give me your thoughts on what that looks like and how will that show up?
Sure. I think there are some things that are inherently human. I don't want to say that. In the future, maybe nothing is inherently human, but for a while, there are going to be things that are inherently human, right? So for example, if you invited me to come here with a podcast with your, agent self, I would probably be like, oh, I don't know, man. Like, maybe not. Like, yeah, maybe later. But if I were to, if you were to say, hey, my AI booking agent is going to deal with all of this, right? Just tell me when you want to come in. I would 100% use that, right? And that's going to be more and more normalized across a whole bunch of things. People are very pissed about AI SDRs, right?
Yeah.
My email's full of junk too, right? It's like, it's not fun, right?
Yeah.
In fact, I have a DryMerge automation that, automatically trashes, junk emails that are selling things to me, right? But what if, right, you were the 1 in 1,000 person who the email was actually meant for? And what if it was beautifully personalized, right? It just seemed so compelling, selling you the thing you need at this very time. I'd respond and say, yeah, let's hop on a call, right? And so that's the direction this is going, right? Right now, there's a bunch of junk because, people want to scale fast, people want to test how things work, right? But eventually, the kind of spam interactions you see are going to be really good, and they're going to make you feel really good. And the inherently human problem that you have, which is my business isn't working, right? LLMs are going to reach out to you and they're going to say, I can make your business work, and you're going to believe them, right? So I think, I'm thinking a lot in terms of the business end. I think there's gigantic consumer opportunities, right? People have already talked about, I think it's almost cliche, at least in like the Valley at this point, about like, oh, I go onto Netflix and then it generates me a movie of what I want, right?
That's definitely, or I had this idea last night, I feed the model, like build me a movie this evening for us to watch.
Exactly.
And then it takes my dream and turns it into a movie.
And it's like, whoa, oh my God, that's great. Like I would use the fuck out of that. I would like just constantly use it, right? But I think beyond that, it's also going to, if it knows everything about you, right? If I could read all your emails and then really think about it, right? And then maybe read some of your texts if you really wanted to give them to me, right? And then really think about it. I'd be like, I think on this Friday night, you want to watch this movie that I just made for you.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, you don't want to, here's 5 others. And they would be brilliant. Like, you know, they would be movies where it's like, this is the best thing I've ever watched. You're going to be able to select that, right? So the inherently like base human things like, you know, kind of pleasure, whatever, you know, like business, right? You know, interaction, those things are just going to be completely optimized by software, right? And if you have intelligence, which is able to reason about the facts about you, right? And really just deliver like the dopamine maximizing thing, then it's going to do it, right? And that's going to be the kind of long arc.
Yeah, we see that today, like in TikTok, right?
Oh, yeah,
a great example of an app that the algorithm maximizes that dopamine release, and it knows how to get it.
And that's just with organic people making stuff.
Yep.
Right? That's like, it's not even like personalized to you, right? It's just a random person somewhere made something that fits with you. Yep. Imagine if something could make something for you.
It's a matchmaker.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right.
I find that fascinating. Well, I want to take a step in a congruent direction, but I want to talk about friction. I love the concept of friction when it comes to how people bring technology into their lives.
Sure.
Because everyone has things that they buy and they love and are a part of their life because it makes their life easier. A great example that is ubiquitous in our life is AirPods.
Yeah.
And wireless headphones. AirPods made wireless headphones ubiquitous, but they made them can't be without.
Yeah.
Now there's no way to realistically maximize your ability to use your phone.
Yeah, I get stressed out
a set of
when
AirPods.
I don't have my AirPods.
Yeah. Why? Because you're used to multitasking now. You're used to talking to someone and writing a Slack or listening to a podcast or continuing to maximize your ability to work and do effort. So and Apple as an ecosystem is great at minimizing friction and maximizing your ability to stay focused on the task. People challenge the Apple ecosystem because it's closed. Yes, that's true. But if you think about why they do that, well, they did it because it allows them to make sure that people have the most elegant, happy experience, and it leaves them with what? Happy, satisfied users. But when we think about friction as a thing that doesn't have to exist in our lives, I look at AI, specifically agents, as a way to reduce friction in our lives.
Yeah.
We talked about those text message exchanges to get here. That's friction.
Yeah.
Right? We wanted to talk, but we had to go through this friction.
Right.
Another great example of friction is business meetings.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
Like if someone wants to get on a call with me for 30 minutes, unless they want to get to know me, I really try to figure out, can we do this in 15 minutes?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, do we need to be here?
Totally agree.
For 30 minutes?
Yeah.
Like what do we have to know in advance to just come to a decision?
Right.
And make a decision? And what I find, especially when I worked in corporate, is that you spend a lot of time in a meeting getting everyone up to speed on the latest context, especially in sales or in go-to-market. Someone likely called a meeting because they just got off a call with a customer.
Yeah.
And then everyone's got to get caught up in the context. Why? Because it's doing a business transaction in enterprise SaaS is an orchestration event.
Yeah.
You have people playing lots of different roles and working on behalf of the customer. But everything in that is full of friction. It's full of people time. It's full of fully burdened employee costs. It's full of software. You know, you could have a Gong call, you could have a Slack message, you could have the underlying software that you sell that you then have to take the customer context up and put into your software. Like suddenly, I've just described a big pile of friction that is between what the customer wants, which is a business problem solved, and this business's opportunity to even get at that problem.
A lot of the business problem they want to solve is likely friction too.
Yeah. So how much time do we spend shuffling man hours around to just get what we want in business? I think a lot more than people are willing to admit, because I think people personify or they identify, I am my work, I'm the product of my work. And people admire having full calendars.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm very, very busy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have to be?
Yeah. I do think there is something to for the meeting example specifically, there's something to human interaction that I'm not sure it's inherently valuable, because if you took it away and for a year and asked people, do you care? They might say, no, I don't want it, right? But take COVID as an example. There was a meaningful lack of human interaction, like in-person interaction. People craved it. You know what I'm saying? So there could be things even in business where you do just want a little bit of friction. When you remove too much of it, you're like, okay, I want to swing back in the other direction. I want to talk to people, right? I want to hash things out, even if I could have this perfect agent, right, do it for me, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it comes up in other contexts too. I'll give you a great example because business, we always view business as one business in context, but let's say there's 3 businesses trying to work together.
Right.
Well, maybe 2 businesses agreed on a problem and a 3rd business is involved. And they're like, wait a second, you're favoring this person too much. I need to add some friction to this process because we're heading in a direction that might not be good for the 3 of us. Or maybe I have an incentive to kind of pull us closer to the middle because I see something that everyone doesn't see. So friction, I think, isn't necessarily net bad, but I think that we unintentionally put a lot of friction into places where it doesn't need to be, and we're very reticent to pull it out. I think Toby Lutke does a great job at at Shopify of just knocking meetings off the calendar, no recurring meetings, cancel them all. Because people get into this ritual of, I have to prepare for this meeting. I come to this meeting. My job is to talk for 5 minutes in this meeting. And I justify my very, very high salary because I show up in this meeting and I'm ready to present what I've done. I think culturally, we glorify that in a way such that we miss often, did we get something done?
Yeah.
Did something happen?
Yeah.
And I want to bring this back to how you're building DryMerge and how you're thinking about building out the team. Because what I'm hearing from a lot of companies I'm talking to is they're taking a different look at how they build their company. They want to keep small teams that rely heavily on tooling, especially AI tooling, to amplify themselves. And they want to get profitable very, very quickly because they see that as a route to kind of commanding their path as a company. How do you guys, or how are you thinking about this problem at DryMerge?
Yeah, we have literally DryMerge agents that probably save us a full day of time each per week, right? And so if we didn't have DryMerge, then we'd need another person to do that work, right? But we don't need another person to do that work. A lot of it is emailing. A lot of it is reading things and sending the most predictable emails you've ever seen, right? And then recording that interaction, et cetera, et cetera. So in my mind, chatting with people is very expensive, right? Kind of bringing people on board is very expensive. And for the right person, a lot of the time it is so worth it, right? You will, our founding engineer is absolutely cracked, brilliant, right? And we save so much time. And there's no way we could have done that with AI, right? There's just no way. People are like, oh, AI coding agents are good. No, if you've seen a true 10x engineer go at 10 problems in a week, it's still nowhere close. It's probably going to get there, but it's nowhere close, right? So for us, it's what is the minimal amount of people we need to achieve profitability, one, but then also become a big business, right? It's probably just not that high. We build automation software. So whenever we're doing something a lot, it's like, okay, wait, we should just use our software to do this, right? And then we do.
Yeah.
Right? And that's time shaved off. So we can focus on, building the product and going to market and getting to users who find it valuable. With AI now, you can actually switch. Now you can intelligently move all the data in Salesforce over to HubSpot, and it will take you a day, maybe, right? Depending on the size of your organization. Realistically, right now, it's probably going to be a couple months, right?
Yeah, I mean, I worked in the space for a while. I can tell you any system of record migration is taken very seriously by big businesses because of the disruption cost. Most reasons why businesses won't pursue it is not because they don't want to do it, but because the risk of instituting, of having an operational mishap while you're doing that is far too high, and they look for other areas.
Exactly.
So I think you're right in that systems of record aren't going to go away, but the problem space really exists on top of them.
Yes.
They are the institutionalized knowledge,
Right.
for lack of a better term. And you see it also, in big companies when major employees leave.
Yeah.
How much do they take with them?
Everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
Right. But also not everything at the same time.
Yeah.
Right? Because when Thomas Kurian left Oracle to go OCI to go work at Google Cloud, Oracle kept growing.
Yeah.
You took a very skilled person and moved them to a different space,
Right.
and they're still successful. And I think that's because, again, Oracle nailed their market. They're very successful, and also
There was an institution already built.
Yeah.
There was a money machine going. It wasn't going to be stopped.
yeah. And then another business said, "Hey, I want that institution." So I think what you're going to see is the people that build institutions will stick around, and the institutions will still be mimicked and built on. But I don't think it's going to be easy to find those integration points.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of where we'll go, because when I look at like social media today,
Yeah.
when you see people that see success in social media, it's often because they've put themselves in a position where they're so authentic that their brand sells, and then they launch. Right. And then there's the next tier where everyone is playing the role of someone
Yes.
who catches the attention and is authentic.
Right.
And I think that encourages the spread of what do they call it? Brain rot. Right? You see all this brain rot showing up where it's like, I'm a derivative work of a derivative work of a derivative work, and all of a sudden I lose the originality because I'm just a bunch of compounded derivatives. I think that as we begin to seek people with good taste, and we begin to seek, I want to know what this person thinks. Like, wouldn't it be nice to know, hey, I sent our MVP to this tech visionary, and they said it's really good.
Yeah.
Well, what if it actually was? What if in order to get that person's endorsement, they said, yeah, I've got these evals. You run your model against this. Like, if it passes my evals, like, I'll tell you it's good.
Yeah.
But they don't have to get involved.
Right. That'd be great.
I think we'll see something that looks like that.
Yeah.
I just don't know how we'll get there. When you look at the space that you work in, the space is filled with cynics, skeptics, optimists.
Right.
All these types of people.
Yeah.
How do you confront the most challenging bucket, which is the cynics that will just seek to diminish technology because it just doesn't do what they want, or they'll look to find a reason not to adopt it?
Doesn't do what they want.
Or said differently, they seek to see in the tool what they want to see, and they will find it, and they'll assign a label to it as soon as they find it, even if it's not true.
Right. I think there are some things which are too convincing to be a cynic for forever. Nobody, I could be a cynic and I could say, I could ride a horse in 1885. I'm like, my kids will never drive a car. My kids might drive a car, There's some things that are just so inevitable and kind of structurally alter things so much that everybody's using them, right? I could say, I'm never going to use an iPhone, right? Or I'm never going to text somebody when, to express condolences, but eventually it's just too inevitable. It's just too undeniable. And I think that for cynics, I'll speak to kind of the idea of AI replacement, or at least competence in, kind of competence at human level. I think it's already there for a lot of stuff, and it's going to get there for a lot more, right? And I think it will just become inevitable when you see AI do your job better than you. You're like, oh, well, I guess that's it, right? And you can even say like, no, it doesn't do it, but you'll know, so I think at some degree, the number of cynics will just go down with adoption. And then for those that remain, it will just kind of be obvious, right? It won't really matter all that much. You know what I'm saying? It's too inevitable.
Yeah. It's like the people that argued about the printing press.
Yeah.
Okay, you can continue to argue it, but it's here.
It's here. Like, what are you gonna do?
Well, I want to kind of talk a little bit about
Sure.
when it comes to the things that are inevitable, right? This technology is coming and it's going to show up and it's going to change. But right now you are building a technology company.
Yes.
And you are mired in reality, which is no matter what, I've got to transact.
Yeah.
When we leave this conversation, you're going to go look at your phone, you're going to see emails, and you're going to go back into the reality of what's real.
Correct.
Could you talk to me a bit about balance?
Yeah.
How do you drive your company forward knowing that you have to strike a balance of what can we do today with the goal of being somewhere better in the future?
Right. Let me think this through. There will be a really gigantic company who does what we do, right? And that knowledge is like comforting and then also like disturbing, right? Because there is no guarantee whatsoever it's going to be us, right? And in the day-to-day, you need to keep that, you need to be confident about that vision, right? You also need to want it to be you really bad, right? You want to like need it, right? And so that's how we think about it, where it's like, we are 100% sure that there will be a platform, right, that allows anyone, like non-technical, to describe what they want, an AI agent that connects to their apps, right, and does the task exactly as they want it to do. Whether any task, any research task, data movement, et cetera, right? But going back to the core of your question, which is, how do we decide what to do today? We need to make users happy. What users can we make happy the most, right? How much do they pay us? How do we get more of the things that we know we're good at, right? More of the users that we know we're good for to pay us more, right? And that's really just it, right? It's like, how do we, you hypothesis test, right? You get a bunch of usage. You say, okay, this is good, this is good, this is bad, this is bad. Turns out that the product needs to improve for this core segment, which we see most promising for, right? So we'll improve the product. Turns out that we're not getting to nearly as many of these people as we need to be. We're going to figure out new go-to-market motions to try to get to them, right? That's the basic thing, right? It's like, here's the big vision, right? Here's our target next month.
Yeah.
Just get to next month. Just get to next month, right? Every month.
Well, I want to kind of dig further into how this looks like when we face the reality. The reason I love working in the early stage is the reality is your company's not going to be what your company is in the future. It's going to be something different. Right. And it'll be what you build, but it will be something different. Yeah. And you've already talked about it. You guys started building a dev tools company. I love to talk to every founder about how do you discover the problem you ultimately work on? Because later stage companies get afraid of this word called the pivot. Right. They make these analogies, oh, it's a big ship, it takes time to steer. Put that aside for a second. Yeah. You're playing in a different space where you have to be nimble. Yeah. Could you give me your view? Like, how do you keep yourself focused on the problem while also being ready to just shift the focus I don't want to say shift the focus, shift the company's direction to make sure you're actually solving the problem you're focused on? Yeah.
So it's actually really interesting with AI, I think. I did like some startup stuff in high school, and it was just writing websites for people. And that wasn't too hard because there weren't that many moving pieces. You didn't know if, like, in startups, the technology can permit your use case a month after you spend the entire previous month really trying to make it reliable. Yeah. That's what happened for us, right? There was a period at which we were like, oh, it's just not working. Yeah. We have to make it work. And then a model came out that made it work, right? So for us, I would say we didn't get here in a very traditional path. We had an idea. I was going into my senior year of college. Sam had just graduated. We'd only ever written code, right? I had an idea of something that I thought could be good, right? I had built integrations in the past, but I had no deep knowledge of the problem, right? And so we built cool code, and then it didn't work, right? And then we were like, okay, we need to build for people, right? Yeah. This is what we learned in YC. It's like, people have real problems. We need to talk to people and learn their problems and then try to build for it, right? But at the same time, right, it's not that simple. You can always do vertical software, but you need to really believe in what you're doing. You need to enjoy building the product you're building. So then it was like, okay, how should we build the product that we want to build that solves people's problems. And we talked to a bunch of customer success managers, right? We talked to a bunch of salespeople. And the reason we did that was due to conversations we'd had with, different investors, et cetera, right? And then we were like, okay, well, it turns out all these people are moving data between apps, right? Developers also do that, but they, their apps are the ones they're building. So let's just move data between apps that exist, right? And then, it turns out there's a whole bunch of other companies in this space, right? How can we differentiate from those? We can't just clone the product. That would be really bad. We're like, what are the pain points as people use these products? And then it's like, turns out that 90% of people who use Zapier actually know how to code. That's surprising. Is that true? And then you look into it further and it's like, oh yeah, it is true. So maybe we make a really easy interface for stuff like this to allow actual non-technical people to connect their apps, because they definitely want to connect their apps. Because there's the searches on Google for it, there's the number of hits, right? There's, you talk to them and they're like, my real issue is that I just spend, 4 hours doing meeting notes after meetings, right? And then you're like, oh, okay, cool. We just need to make it easier for this segment, which happens to be a very large segment of knowledge workers, right? And then you think you have clarity, but then you go further, right? And it's like, you need to build the technology. And the technology only works for a simple sync, right? And it only works 80% of the time. Then you go further and you're like, what are we actually good for, right? What are we good for the technology right now? And where's the technology going to go in literally 3 months, right? And so you build for the next 3 months, right? And then you see kind of other use case, in our case, it was get a bunch of users anywhere, from anywhere we could, right? And, there was kind of SEO stuff that went into that, right? There was launches, et cetera, et cetera. And that showed us with, relatively large sample of who was sticky, who tried the most, right? And who cared the most. And then it's just, focus on the people who care the most, right? Once you have actual users, it's good, because if they talk to you, that's great. That's the best information you're going to get. And so just religiously do that, right? Talk to users, build what the ones who want the product most want, right? And then, we got to a point where it's like, turns out that there's coherent segments of people who really want the product. Okay. Turns out it's really hard to build for all of them. Yeah. Right? It's actually really hard. Even though we're building it, AI is supposed to do everything for us, but building integrations is hard, right? It's easier said than done. You have to make them actually work and, reliable. And there's pre-processing steps and information retrieval and making the interface simple for people, right? And then it's okay, select one and just make them love it, right? And then maybe we can do the others. So I would say it's the same kind of funnel concept, just continually applied to the current stage you're at, and then hyper-focus. I think this is the most underserved segment. There's connectivity products that move data 24/7, right? While you're sleeping, you get a new email, it's already in. So there's no point of contact, for you and the device. You set it up and then you're done. And I think that saves you the most time, right? Because if you were doing it in the first place, you wouldn't have to have the batch data movement thing, right? You don't need to go into the chat interface every time and say, hey, send this. And then for the distillation thing, it can't send data anywhere, right? So if you really want to connect two systems, data needs to be sent. So I think where we're going to have the biggest impact is being the most customizable, right? Easiest to use, right? And most accurate background data worker, right? You can think of it as a way to curate your systems of record 24/7. And I don't think that exists on the market right now.
I think that's an incredible vision, because that's actually, when people ask me where do you think you'll see the AI show up? I say, well, it'll start by you just looking up.
Yeah.
And they're like, what do you mean? I said, look up. We spend all this time in our day looking down at our phones.
Yeah.
You'll know it's arrived whenever that phone stays in your pocket.
You can just do stuff.
You're just doing stuff.
You don't need to care.
Yeah. You wake up in the morning, you put in your AirPod, and you know the 5 most important things that came in over the night.
Here's something to make it super material.
Yeah.
When we initially started getting, a fair amount of new inbound users, right, who were trying out the product, I would manually sit down and spend my day writing a custom email to all of them saying, hey, saw you ran into this issue. Can I help you? Right? That was miserable. It took me hours and hours, right? Literally like 3 hours every morning. So I was on my phone. I set up an automation that looked at the exact same information and sent the exact same email that I would have sent. I no longer do that. And I only need to look at my phone when somebody responds and they're like, yeah, I ran into an issue, it said this error. And that is an infinitely better use of my time.
Yeah.
Right? And it's liberating, honestly.
Those are the sorts of things that when they start happening, we're going to realize, wow, that was the better way to do it.
Yeah.
That's the magical moment I'm kind of excited for, because you found a use case where that worked for you.
Right.
I sit here thinking, I wish I could do that for me, because that's not how my day works and operates.
Yeah.
But I love that. A few more questions for you.
Sure.
I'd love to kind of hear from you. Like, if you could wave a magic wand, what's one technical challenge that you would just solve?
Latency.
That's in front of you?
Latency, 100%. O1 so for context, O1 is the most powerful model on the market right now. There's also an open source version that just came out. It's not as good, but these models are a complete...
Talking about DeepSeek?
Yeah, DeepSeek, right? Complete step function change from models like Claude 3.5 or 4.0 on agentic tasks, which is the tasks that we do. And the reason they're so good is because they think about what they do for a long time before they do it, right? So
the chain of thought's amazing.
The chain of thought is great.
Like I found that like it when I used to work with 4.0, I had to back and forth and back and forth, and then I got O1 Pro. I'm like, wow, it did all that for me. I mean, I had to go walk away and get a cup of coffee, but
it did, right? So it did it perfectly, but you had to get the cup of coffee while it did it, right? And so for us, we moved to O1 in the back end, and things that were at 70% went to 100%. It was like instant, wow, this will do it the correct way 100% of the time, as long as you provide the correct instructions. The issue is that it takes a long time, right? And when you're doing an agentic task, it's a loop. Every decision, it's going to labor over it, right? And really think it through. And there's things that, we did to speed that up, like parallel tool calling, for example. Instead of, going through and searching the internet every time and going through that loop. It's like, I'm gonna do 100 searches, right? And then once those searches are done, here's what I'm gonna do, right? But that can only take you so far. When a user's in a test loop, they want it to be right and they want it to be fast, because they don't wanna labor and, kind of toil with the product. And so if we could, achieve the same level of accuracy we achieve in a 10th, a 20th of the time, huge unlock.
Yeah.
Huge unlock.
I agree with you. I love that you're so quick with that answer too, because that's one of the things I think about now when I use these tools is I spend time now. I have I've had that feeling of like a web page loading that you never experienced because you probably grew up with high-speed internet. Those of us that used modems that had baud rates. Last question for you.
Cool.
What do you look for in people that want to join you on your journey?
I would say the first thing is genuine passion and excitement. Not just about our company, that's very important, but about doing a startup. The second thing is understanding what doing a startup is, right? Because it's actually really hard to be genuinely impactful or genuinely impassioned about doing it if you don't know what it is. It's really hard. Yeah. There's a lot of uncertainty. There are so many things that are broken, and they're going to be broken, but there's a bigger fire, right? Like, you can't solve that issue if the platform's down. You need to go fix it, right? And there's nobody to go to but you.
It's you.
It's like, it's you. You got to do it. It's like, oh, this isn't working? Well, okay, go do it, right? Aside from that, because I think those two things like make up the DNA, right? And it's also like, you have to work really hard for a long time, right? And it's not for everyone. But I would say the third thing is really ingenious problem solving, right? Fast. The way we work is we wake up every day, we have a plan. There will be 10 really hard tickets that happened during the night while we were asleep. So we have to do those 10 tickets, and then we have to go and do the high-level vision for the company. And high-level vision is literally like 2 months out. It's like, what are we going to do in the next 2 months? right? And so, our cycles are constrained by how fast we can deliver value to people by eliminating those 10, and then how fast we can push the company forward by doing the 2 months of work. And hopefully we can do that in like 2 weeks, right? So very, very quick, always online, right? And then always, dedicated to the problem, right? Of, I believe in the vision, I believe in what we're doing, gotta go do it.
I love it. Well, Edward, thanks for taking time to sit down with me. This was a fascinating conversation.
Great.
I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was great. Great talking.
Awesome.